Hello and welcome to Secure World Behind the Scenes, our exclusive interview series. This is Tom Bechtold, your co-host for today's program. Thank you all for joining us. Today, Bruce Sussman from the Secure World Media team will be talking with Dale Zabriskie from Proofpoint Security Awareness Training, formerly known as Wombat Security. Before we begin, I'll give you a brief introduction of our guests today. We have, as I mentioned, Dale Zabriskie, Security Awareness Evangelist at Proofpoint Security Awareness Training. We also have my co-host, Bruce Sussman, Director of Digital Content for Secure World. Without any further ado, Bruce, please take it away, sir.
Thank you, Tom, and welcome, Dale. Really a privilege to have someone with your level of expertise on the topic at hand, which is security awareness and the idea of being able to sell a security awareness program by speaking the right language, for example. And I want to dive into a few questions with you. And the first question I had is, in getting ready for the call, we talked about using your company's annual report as a way to find information to align your program to. Will you explain a little bit about, how you should do this if you're in security and trying to push the needle on security awareness programs?
You bet, and thank you for your time. I'm happy to be here. If you're working with a public company, by law, those companies have to provide to the Security and Exchange Commission an annual report. It's also called a 10K, and that can be found on your company's website. It's a public document, usually under either investors or under the about. There's down where you'll find it. But you'll find an investors section, and there will be filings or SEC filings, or annual report link. And you'll find in there that document. And in that document is an area or a section called risk factors. And this is all the annual reports are the same because this is the structure that's required by the SEC. And in that risk factor section is where organizations, public companies, make statements that say essentially, these are risks that we identify in our space. And if any of these happen, you cannot sue us because we've already identified them, right? We've said that they are issues. We're aware of them. And in that risk factor section, you'll find all sorts of things that are germane to the company, its industry, where it does business. It'll be everything that you can imagine about risk. There's all sorts of operational risk and the customer risk and credit risk. But fairly near the top in that section, you'll find a statement that talks about cybersecurity being a risk. And in there is verbiage that will state something to the effect of our systems are subject to misappropriation, to hackers, to viruses. Could be any number of ways that they say it. But the bottom line is what they're saying is we are subject to risks in the cybersecurity space that could materially harm our business. And these are things that at the top of the company, they say are issues. And so what you do then is you are aware of that, and you go to within your own world now. It shows that you're aware of the company and what we're trying to, as a whole, what we're trying to achieve and the things that we're trying to avoid. And you can align what you're trying to do with these statements. Now, I do this a lot for customers that I speak with, and I actually did this yesterday with a very large global company, and it had some interesting statements in there about human error and people. And so security awareness training is all about people. And so what it does, it just shows your organization and the people that you work with that you're a company person, right? That you're aware of what's going on in the organization and that what you're trying to do helps to mitigate these risks that have been stated by the company itself. That's the first step, right? In just aligning your world with the statements that the company is stating are important to them.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love that way of showing that you understand the business and you're just trying to help the business achieve its objectives, right? That's kind of how you're selling it. That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay, great. Now that 10K is a gold mine of information, it sounds like, under the risk factor section. What if you work for a private company? Where would you find similar types of information?
So there are lots of companies that don't have to file that document every year, right? And so what you have to do is take a little more research. And this kind of research, in my opinion, is kind of the foundational research, whether you're with a private or a public company. Because it's not just about, oh, these bad things are out there and we need to, be aware of them. We need to squelch them down. We need money to do that. The thing to do is to understand what your company's goals are, your business goals. What are they trying to achieve? What what financial goals exist within your organization? We want to raise this much money. We want to hit this amount of revenue by this time. We want to change in this way. We want to move into these markets. This kind of information should be available in a number of areas. Number one, your upper management, your senior management, they're out there talking about these things. Do the Google search, do the research, go into LinkedIn, go into Facebook even. LinkedIn is going to be a little more efficient, but do the research on the people in your organization. What are they doing? What are they talking about? Where are they at? Who are they associating with? What do you know about them? This whole approach that I'm talking about is knowing your customer. Your customer is your upper management and senior management in this example. Learn everything you can about them. And on your own company's website, you're going to find things like a vision statement or a mission statement. There's going to be verbiage that talks about this is what we do. This is what we believe in. This is how we approach things. And you need to speak that language. You need to show that what we're trying to do in security awareness training is going to help us reach these goals that have been stated. This moves you away from just being in a bit of an island of trying to, well, people keep clicking, we need to train them, and we need to, stop Susie from clicking so much, or whatever it is, or Bob's over here, he's our poster child. It moves it to say, look, we need to together help our company succeed. And one way that I can help us reach the goals that have been stated is to do better things within security awareness training. You see the difference there? It's not just sitting in a lone space, just kind of barking out, help, help, we need to do these things, and blah, blah, blah. It's showing how what you're doing is relative to the organization. So there's lots of information about the company. Let me give you one experience I had with a private company where they were building a new campus. They were moving a lot of their offices to a new campus, like 600,000 square feet. It was a significant thing. And the conversation that we were going to have didn't have anything to do specifically with facilities and new construction. But I just brought it up. I said, hey, I saw in the paper that you guys are building a new facility. How is that going? What kind of stress is that putting on the IT organization or InfoSec? And it opened up a whole new conversation about things of deployment, and with that 600,000 square feet came new people. And so I'm just talking about things, right? I'm just interested in what's going on in their world. So take the time to look at what's happening in your company. Read the news about it. Read everything you can about the website and the individuals that you're working with. Just get to know them, and you'll find little nuggets that you can utilize to present your information in a very relative manner. And when you do that, things stick. It just connects. When you have a metric or you have something you want to get by, when you make it relative to the individual or to the organization, it will stick, and people will remember it a lot better.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and those are great tips for where to find that information too. So thank you, Dale. That's excellent. I want to talk a little bit about risk as well. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't bring that up because obviously we discuss risk a lot in cybersecurity. But when it comes to kind of selling a security awareness program, how can we get beyond common risk discussions like, the amount of money lost, et cetera, and make it more specific to our company?
Well, that's so true, and it's a nice segue to think about. Okay, I'm in the macro setting where I'm trying to get information about my company and whether I'm public or private or in a government space. How do I really use it? Because everybody sits through a presentation that's all about, the world lost $482 gazillion last year because of cybersecurity, or so many people are getting hacked, or ransomware does this, or, blah, blah, blah. These general broad brush statements, we use those because we think it's going to, get interest, and people are going to go, wow, really? Oh, my word. And I think we've got desensitized to that a little bit, right? That it's like everybody's saying that. What I was doing yesterday with a customer was part of a briefing where there were a number of presenters who came in to talk to the same customer, and almost all of them kind of started that way, where it's like, here's the threat landscape, blah, blah, blah. And by the third or fourth one, it's like, yeah, we've seen that. And so now if we can get away from the macro and get into the micro, now we get sticky, right? We get sticky with our customers. So the risk discussion is, like you said, Bruce, is so common, and it should be. We should be worried about risk. Okay, let me answer it two ways. Number one, when an organization makes a decision, an IT organization makes a decision to buy something or to implement something or to change something, they're going to do it for one of four reasons, basically. It's going to either lower cost, it's going to improve process, it's going to reduce risk, or it's going to increase revenue. Okay? Lower cost, improve process, reduce risk, or increase revenue. Think about it. Everything you've done in IT will fall into one or more of those categories. Sometimes there's more than one, but often, we just need to, we got risk here we need to take care of. We need to improve this process. It really sucks. That type of thing. Increasing revenue, not so common, right? If you can present an idea and say, this is going to help us get more money into the space, where you'll get a lot of eyeballs on it and people will want to hear about it. But generally, we're worried about improving process and reducing risk. That's where a lot of InfoSec happens. But there are places where we can lower cost and we can, do things there. So think about that. Realize that everything you're doing, or when your boss comes to you and says, we need to do this, we've got this risk out there we need to solve, somewhere farther back, those decisions were made based on one of those four categories, okay? Lowering cost, improving process, reducing risk, or increasing revenue. Okay, great. Now, if you know that and you understand what the risk is we're trying to solve specifically, then now you can speak to it. And with the right type of reporting within the system, I think this is where Proofpoint really shines, in the ability to provide tangible, relative metrics to the practitioner to be able to go and say, here's what's happening, and here's how we're reducing risk specifically within this organization, whether it's in a certain geographic area or whether it's with a certain type of threat, whatever it is. When you're tying, actual results to the reduction of risk, that really helps go a long way. But let me say one other thing about the risk conversation. Risk, think of it as an equation, that the output of that equation, or the product or the result of that equation, helps make the decision about what we're going to do. Because it's easy to say, the bad guys are out there, they're hacking into everything, they're after us, that's a risk. Okay, no, that's not enough, right? I need more tangible information. So the equation of risk has to include a measure of probability. So think about that. That, yeah, there's lots of risks out there, but what's the probability that it's going to happen? And with the right reporting and you get the right metrics, you can show that if you have a serial offender, then you have a much higher probability that there's going to be an issue there and you need to take steps to do that. If you have the ability to show within a broader organization that tying the threats that are coming into your space with the training, and that's a big, big key. And that's where things are headed, and that's why Proofpoint's ahead of the game here, is we're able to tie what's happening, what threats are actually hitting the firewall, coming into your space, to be able to respond and to train on those or to make your audience aware of these specific things. You know, we are seeing this, folks. You're going to see this specific thing pop into your mailbox potentially. We're doing all we can to keep it from happening, but if it does, this is what it looks like. This is what you need to do. So that's a high probability thing that we're now measuring part of the, creating part of that equation. Let me give you one example that's kind of interesting that's not so much in security awareness training, but I really think drives home the point. Years ago in Los Angeles, they had a data center in the city of Los Angeles, a number of them, but one was in an interesting location. So if we think about risks to a data center, one of the big concerns that people have is flooding. Water and servers don't mix, right? Don't get along very well at all. So it's a big risk to see that the flood would come in and hurt a data center. But what's the probability of that happening, really? I mean, most data centers, that's not a big probability thing. Flooding, yeah, it's bad if it happens. Probably not going to happen here. But we build walls around things. We put them in locations where it would take a act of God to bring water to that. So things are pretty low probability, except in the city of Los Angeles, where they had a data center that lived underneath a municipal swimming pool in Southern California on a fault line. Okay, so now what's the probability of a flood in the data center in that situation? So you have to really understand your world, and then using the metrics, using the threat intel, create the equation about risk that can show the need to move the needle, the need to expend some resources, the need to expand or implement a program, because now you're being relative. And remember that relative metrics stick. So I think that's the big key. Figure out what's driving it. One of those four, I call them value dimensions, because they're, what's the value in doing something, right? We're improving a process, we're lowering the cost, et cetera. And when you talk about risk, include that probability in your equation, okay?
That is fantastic. I mean, I really haven't thought of risk as an equation like you were discussing, and certainly the data center under the swimming pool on a fault line. I mean, you talk about
that gets your attention, doesn't it?
That gets your attention, exactly. That's what you're talking about, that stickiness there, because now we're not talking about some generic, it might happen someday kind of thing. Instead, we're talking about,
right.
We have this specific risk on our balance sheet right now. What are we going to do about it? So that's great. Right. I get it. Okay, excellent. Well, all right. So I know you have a lot of expertise in other areas too, and I wanted to ask you about some best practices. Because we get a question a lot at our Secure World conferences. This comes up on panels and things like that. What is something you recommend as far as the frequency of awareness training with all of your experience in the space?
That's one of the probably most common questions that we get a lot, because it's a balancing act where a practitioner in security awareness training is all pumped up and excited to be able to do something, and then you have all these other factors out there, whether they're management in InfoSec, whether they're HR or legal or finance, that are saying, well, no, hold on a second. We can't bombard our people. You can do this occasionally. Or the influence, okay, we do training once a year here. Here's our compliance training. Here's our harassment training. Here's our insider trader training. And you guys get in line, and you're going to do that. And so there's lots of factors that drive that decision, and finding the balance for your organization is always kind of a unique battle. But what we recommend is, if you think about doing phishing simulation, then phishing simulation is often done best, what we see is about every 4 to 6 weeks that you're doing something that's out there. And as you get started, maybe you have some initial stuff that is a little more often, but that think it once a month, every other month, you're putting something out there from a phishing simulation approach. And to our discussion so far, if those things that are being used to do phishing simulation are relative to the organization, some of the threats that you're seeing coming in, some of the things that are issues that you're trying to reduce the risk on, then they become, you get more mind share with the organization to say, we're not just trying to find out who's clicking on things, we're trying to protect ourselves from these threats that are coming in, and this is one way to do that. So you don't want to overdo it, because then it's just yeah, but you want to keep it fresh in a couple of ways. Keep it fresh in its frequency and keep it fresh in its content, so that you're really moving through it in that sense. The thing that I would add to that is that what we see are most organizations, let me rephrase this, I would say a lot of organizations, not so much that it's the total majority, many organizations rely simply on doing phishing simulation. And they think that that's going to be what we can do, or maybe that's all the organization can tolerate right now, or maybe that's all that I can afford to do right now. And those are valid, valid arguments. But the best practices is that you've got to understand and assess the people in your organization. So knowledge assessments, which can be done in between basically the phishing simulations, or on even a broader, maybe quarterly type thing, give you the ability to really move the needle, because now it's not just the phishing linguini test where we're throwing it against the wall and see if it sticks. The knowledge assessments give you much more information about how you might test on a phishing simulation. It gives you a much broader picture. And so we want to try to do those on a periodic basis on the topics that you find are issues. Maybe you need to do more about passwords, or maybe there's physical security. There can be any number of things that you could do assessments on to see, well, what does my user base know, and then how can I, using phishing simulations, really help them get better at it. So, and then the third leg of the stool is really the training. And so the first thing to break down is that knowledge and awareness does not equal, does not reduce the need for training. Just because I know something doesn't mean I know how to deal with it when it comes. So I may know how to spot certain things. I may know this, but if I don't have training on physical security, then just hearing about it isn't enough. So you want to do these things in accordance together, so that they, going back to this idea that they stick, because the just-in-time approach, or what we call teachable moments, where things happen and there's an oops, right? I clicked on a link I shouldn't have, or I fell for a phishing simulation. Let's say that. I fell for a phishing simulation. Our system gives this teachable moment, and then you can auto-enroll individuals into the training, so that close to that experience that they had of oops, they're getting training. So the frequency is not so much I need to do it every, this periodic range, I'm going to do stuff, but when you tie it to the experience of the user, and what our learning science principles show is that it's people really retain the information when, like we say, it's relative to them, but then the training comes close to the experience of the phishing, or the oops, or the topic. So those are the three legs of the stool that need to be done throughout the year, basically. And you look at it in the bigger picture, there's kind of a 3-year plan that we've got a best practices calendar actually we can share that shows here's the best way to kind of roll these things out. But we find that people kind of get all excited at the beginning and they're going, and then it kind of, teeters off to where we're back to once a year. And that's not going to move the needle. So each organization's different for all the different influences there. You've got to come to a consensus, but it's out there, it's frequent, it's in their face. And then you have, I should just close here with that there's all these supporting things that you use, videos and posters and meetings and lunch and learns and executive emails and on and on and on. All sorts of things that you can do to support that so that throughout the year there's this awareness aspect. You're moving, you're raising the tide there, but then you're doing the specific things around training and simulation and knowledge assessments to really understand how well the project's moving so that you can continue, right? Improve your efficacy and improve the ROI.
Okay, that's great. And Dale, I appreciate that three-legged stool kind of visual there, because you can picture how those three pieces all support, the greater goal. But one of my questions is, and I've heard this asked, I've actually heard CISOs or directors of InfoSec say, yeah, my company only wants to do the phishing part. So do you have any tips for, getting the rest of the stool in play? That is so common, and the real key is to first of all, use what you have. You've got some phishing simulation that you're doing. Look at that data and find out the common threads through that data, and you will find some probably consistent things. You're going to find people are going to bubble up. The poster children, right? The folks that just don't seem to get it. And so really look at your data and use that to say, look, okay, we have improved really well. And so here's what happened. When you first do a phishing simulation and you're measuring click rates, the first time you do it, I've seen, talking to an organization this week, they said when we started, we were like 60% click rate. They had people were just like, Yahoo, we're clicking, right? We're just clicking away. But what happens is that falls off really fast when you get some communication back to the user base to say, hey, that was a test, you failed the test, and there's communication. That number is going to come down pretty quickly. But it's going to then plateau and level off, and it's going to be very hard to move it. Sometimes this organization went from 60 to 30. They cut it in half basically overnight. But then it was this slow, long slog to get it below that number. And so you've got to look at it and say, well, 30% of our people are clicking. What is that number? Is that in a 1,000-person organization? Is that a 10,000-person organization? If you've got 3,000 people that continue to click on things, that's a hard argument to avoid by management to say, these folks, they're not getting it, and just doing the phishing simulations, not moving our needle. We need to understand better. We need to do some training. We need to add some assessments. But when you do that, be ready to say, here's the plan. Here's what I want to do and why. And you present the information, you present the plan, and you back it up with the information. I would also add one little thing about communication is we tend to do a lot of the upfront, kind of the State of the Union we talked about of the threat landscape, everybody's doing it, that we tend to lead with those ideas. See a lot of presentations in this area where they lead with all the data. And, we got this going on and this many clicks and blah, 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 blah. When you're talking to executive management and you're trying to get them to do more, start with the end first, okay? And what I mean by that is you walk into the meeting and you tell them what you want. You say, the reason I'm here is to implement knowledge assessments or to do training or whatever it is, okay? You tell them up front what you want from them because they're all busy people. I lovingly call them, they have ADD. They're just all over the place. And you want them
looking at you and thinking about you. And if you come in and you do the dance with the spreadsheet and the click rates and all the drafts and the charts and everything, you don't have them. They're just going on, and they're looking at you going, you know, they're looking at their watch, their phone comes out. You don't really have them. And so you start with the end. The reason I'm here is, and some, you know what I've seen some people do? Say, the reason I'm here is to ask you for $250,000 or $50,000, some number. And that will get their attention. And now that doesn't work for every organization. You kind of have to figure out what will fit for you. But you want to begin with the end. This is what I want from you. And your executive management will appreciate that because now they are they're aware, they're engaged. And often the conversation is, this is what I need, this is what I want from you, this is why we're here today, I'm asking for this, and if I can have 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever, I want to show you how we can take that investment and turn it into something else, right? We're going to take that investment and we're going to reduce the risk in our organization by X. We're going to take that investment and we're going to improve our process so that we have saved this much money or whatever. See what I'm saying? There's lots of different ways to couch it. And when you present it that way of saying, this is why we're here today, I'm respecting you, you wouldn't say this out loud, right? But it just shows that you're respecting the audience to say, the reason we're here today is blank, and if I can have the next 10 minutes, I'm going to show you how we're going to make that investment work for the company. And I often just say, can I have 10 minutes of your time? And just ask that question. And what are they going to say? They're going to say, sure, yeah, that's great, go ahead. Okay, now I've got them. They're with me. What do? Now I can dance. Now I can take out the spreadsheet and the charts and the things and say, this is what's happened. This is the results. These are where we're struggling, and here's what we propose to do about it. And this is, by doing that, it's going to change it this way. So the outcome now is happy people and reduced risk and et cetera, et cetera. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does, and I think you could also see some smiley face emojis, right? You could say at the end too.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
No, that's fantastic because it's almost like you're saying to them, "Let's go along on a journey together," right? And at the end, in just 10 minutes, we're going to have a much better solution to the problem we're facing, or something like that. That's what I hear you saying.
Yes, exactly.
That's great. That's great. Okay, quick question, and this will be my last one because we're about out of time, but I'm just wondering, there are a gazillion, if that's even a word. I've never looked up gazillion to see if that's actually a word, but there are a lot.
It's accepted. We'll take it. Yeah.
Okay, good. There are a lot of cybersecurity awareness training topics. How do you determine what should work, what you should be doing at your organization, or what do you recommend there at Proofpoint?
Well, we talked a little bit about that in the sense of know your threat landscape. Really know, and majority, I'd say, of security awareness training organizations are tied to the hip with InfoSec, or they're run out of the InfoSec department. But there are some out there that are more aligned with training or even HR. So make sure that you know what the threat landscape is and understand the things that are really hitting your firewall, and more importantly, what your users are falling subject to. So the more real it is, that's so much stronger than saying that we're health insurance and we have HIPAA or we have GDPR and we need to do these things. Those are important, and there's no question that compliance drives a lot of what we do in this space. But when you can make it very personal to say, and this, I think, what our technology really excels at is giving that actionable intelligence to the practitioner to say, these are the threats, this is how our user base are reacting to the threats. They are falling for it more than another threat that's there. So we need to really talk about these things. That's probably the best way to deal with it. It becomes, it's your world, is very, very real. But as I said, the industry has a lot to do with it, whatever your industry is in. What compliance things that you are subject to are going to drive things. Geography is going to drive things. You know, talking yesterday with this multinational company, we talked a lot about doing things in the right language at the right time and the right reasons, and you could see them sitting there kind of thinking, and the wheels are churning, and they're saying, well, in Australia we could do this, and we could do it this way. And so it's not a one-size-fits-all. You've got to step back and look at, number one, what threats are hitting your organization. Number two, what industry are we in, and what are the hot points there that we need to be aware of? Number three, what are the compliance responsibilities that we have? And then, geographically, what do we have to deal with, and how should we approach things? When you just start to really know your customer, and you start to run a program in a locale where you've or within an organization that you've done that research on, you're going to have some wins that come out of that to say, look, we went, let's just pick on Australia because that was part of our conversation yesterday. We went to Australia, we took our team there, and these were the things that they were seeing and the problems they were having. We went through our pilot, we did this, we did that, we spent X number of months, whatever the time frame is, and here are the results. Phenomenal. This was wonderful. Let's replicate that. Let's move this now back and do it somewhere else. Okay, well, what are the needs that we have there? So you learn some programmatic functions that you can replicate, but then you have to fine-tune based on these other factors. So being aware, and it's tough from a practitioner standpoint because there's so many options, so many things to choose from, right? And we want to do it all. We offer, Proofpoint, we offer all these different modules for training. And it can be overwhelming to say, well, where do I start? And I want the full meal deal. I just want to do it all. And that's great, but that's not the way to succeed because you're going to have, first of all, you open it up too much. There's too many choices. It's not going to be as effective. So get the BB gun out, put the shotgun down for a minute, and take your time, figure out what you need to do. And I'm going to go back one more time to the assessments, where we talked about that, phishing simulation is the big deal that most people do. But if you're doing assessments, that's going to answer that question so well. This is our knowledge gap, or these are our knowledge gaps within the organization. We need to train to that. That's the most powerful thing you can do. But it's interesting how the phishing simulation tends to take center stage a lot, but the knowledge assessments are critical to then, joining that information with your industry, your compliance regulations, the threats that are out there. So that's what I would say is start with knowing, where your people really are at.
That is fantastic. Dale, I really appreciate your time today and all the insights. I'm just thinking back to some of the things you said, thinking of risk as an equation, looking at those value dimensions and realizing that's how the business is going to make a decision, and kind of couching your pitch for a security awareness program around that, and of course being a salesperson and speaking the right language. So thank you for sharing your insights. Really appreciate all that you do, and I'll turn it back over to Tom.
Appreciate it, Bruce. Thank you. And thank you, Dale, for sharing your time and experience with us today. Great information. Just really strong proof that these things can be fixed. It's just knowing how to do it appropriately within your organization.
You gotta know your organization, and that will help you a long way.
That's the key, I think. Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Dale. Be on the lookout for future behind-the-scenes interviews with Bruce and our media team. On behalf of Secure World, I do want to thank everybody for their time and participation today. This does end our interview.